Hey guys, tonight we're going to talk about angels. Picture it. You're out in a field, maybe just checking on your sheep. The sky is a deep, velvety black, punctured by a million tiny, cold stars. The only sound is the gentle chewing of the flock and the whisper of a breeze through dry grass. It's peaceful. It's normal. Then, the entire sky rips open with a light so blinding it feels like a physical blow. A being stands before you, radiating a power that makes your bones hum and your teeth ache. It's tall, impossibly so, and its voice isn't just a sound you hear with your ears. It's a thunder that resonates in your very soul. You're flat on your face in the dirt before you even realize you've fallen, certain that your life is over. Frankly, if this happened to any of us today, you probably won't survive this. The sheer shock would likely stop your heart cold. And yet, the very first words that boom through your being are, "Do not be afraid." So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to see where you're all listening from tonight, so feel free to drop your city or country and the local time in the comments. It's always a quiet joy to see how far these stories travel. Let's begin with a little thought experiment. Close your eyes for a moment. Not if you're driving, of course, but if you're settled in for the night, just let your eyelids grow heavy. Now, when I say the word angel, what picture floats into your mind? For many of us, it's a gentle, serene image, isn't it? It might be a beautiful figure with soft, feathery white wings, perhaps dressed in a flowing white robe, with a golden halo hovering delicately over perfectly styled hair. Maybe you see one of those chubby little baby angels from a Renaissance painting, a cherub plucking at a tiny harp. Or perhaps it's the image from a Christmas card, a graceful guardian angel watching over sleeping children, a soft, comforting smile on its face. These are the angels of our popular culture. They are sweet, safe, and utterly non-threatening. They are, in essence, celestial teddy bears. And I'm here to tell you, with the utmost gentleness, that the Bible has a very, very different story to tell. The beings that we encounter in the pages of Scripture are, well, they're not safe. They are not soft. And they are certainly not something you'd want to stumble across in a dark alley, or even a well-lit one. The biblical accounts of angelic encounters are so consistently overwhelming, so utterly reality-shattering for the humans involved, that the angels have to lead with what is essentially a celestial public service announcement. Do not be afraid. It become their calling card, their catchphrase. Think about that for a second. If you have to start every single conversation by telling the other person not to have a panic attack, it says something profound about your appearance. It's like a 7-foot-tall, muscle-bound stranger bursting into your room and having to immediately say, "Don't worry, I'm not going to hurt you." Your first thought wouldn't be relief. It would be, "Why on earth did I think you were going to hurt me?" What about you is so inherently terrifying that you have to say that right away? That is the question we're going to sit with tonight. We're going to peel back centuries of greeting card imagery and discover this "be not afraid" crew. We'll look at why these messengers, because that's what the word angelos in Greek and malak in Hebrew means, simply messenger, are so consistently, breathtakingly terrifying. It's not because they are evil or malicious. Quite the opposite. It's because they are so intensely holy. They are creatures who exist in some way we can't fully comprehend in the direct, unfiltered presence of God. And when a fragment of that reality, a sliver of that untamed, uncreated light, breaks through into our world of soft shadows and predictable physics, it tends to break our brains a little bit. The German theologian Rudolf Otto called it the mysterium tremendum, et fascinans, the mystery that is both terrifying and fascinating. You're drawn to it, captivated by its beauty and power, but at the same time, you are acutely aware that it could unmake you in an instant. That's the space where humans meet angels in the Bible. It's a space of awe, and awe, my friends, is a cocktail of wonder and sheer, bone-deep terror. So let's start our journey not with a clap of thunder, but in the quiet, shimmering heat of a Middle Eastern afternoon. We find ourselves with Abraham, the great patriarch, sitting at the entrance of his tent in the heat of the day. The book of Genesis paints a simple, domestic scene. The air is thick and still. The sun beats down on the dusty landscape. Abraham is likely drowsy, maybe fanning himself, watching the heat haze dance over the plains of Mamre. This is a man who has walked with God, who has heard his voice, who has left his home and his country on the strength of a promise. He's no stranger to the divine, but he's not expecting visitors. Suddenly he looks up, and 3 men are standing nearby. The text is beautifully understated. There was no flash of light, no sound of trumpets. They just appeared. One moment, the horizon is empty, the next, 3 figures are there. Is Abraham startled? Perhaps. But his immediate reaction isn't fear. It's an overwhelming sense of duty and hospitality. In his culture, a stranger was a sacred trust. To offer water, food, and rest was not just polite, it was a moral imperative. So Abraham, an old man, doesn't hesitate. He hurries. He runs to meet them. He bows low to the ground, and he begs them to stay. "My Lord," he says to one of them, "if I have found favor in your sight, do not pass by your servant." He puts on a feast. He tells Sarah, his wife, to bake bread, not just any bread, but fine flour, the best they have. He runs to the herd and chooses a tender, choice calf and gives it to a servant to prepare. He brings them curds and milk, the fresh cooked meat, and the warm bread, and he stands by them under the tree while they eat. Can you picture it? The quiet dignity of this old sheik serving these mysterious strangers. He doesn't know who they are, but he gives them his absolute best. He honors them, and then the conversation shifts. "Where is your wife, Sarah?" one of them asks. It's an intimate question. How do they know her name? Abraham, probably a little surprised, replies, "She is in the tent." Then the lead visitor, now identified in the narrative as the Lord, makes an impossible promise. "I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah your wife shall have a son." Inside the tent, Sarah is listening, and she laughs. It's not a joyful laugh. It's a bitter, cynical laugh. A laugh born of decades of disappointment, of a body that has long since passed the age of childbearing. She thinks, after I am worn out and my Lord is old, shall I have pleasure? It's a deeply human, deeply relatable moment of disbelief. The promise is too good, too impossible. It's absurd. The being outside hears her. Not just the sound, but the thought behind it. Why did Sarah laugh? He asks Abraham. And now the mask of ordinary humanity begins to slip. This is no mere traveler. Ordinary travelers don't know your wife's name. They don't make impossible promises. And they certainly don't hear silent, cynical laughter from inside a tent. Sarah, now genuinely frightened, denies it. I did not laugh. The reply is simple, calm, and devastatingly perceptive. No, but you did laugh. There's no overt, be not afraid here, but the numinous is present. The terror is quiet, creeping. It's the fear of being completely, utterly known. The fear that comes when you realize you are in the presence of something that sees right through your walls, right into the most private corners of your heart. These beings looked like men, they ate like men, but they were not men. They were messengers from a reality where old women have bobbies and cynical thoughts are as loud as shouts. Abraham and Sarah weren't terrified by a monstrous appearance, but by a quiet, omniscient power that revealed the absurdity of their own limitations. Their world, with its predictable rules of biology and aging, had just been gently, but firmly, turned upside down. This encounter is a gentle introduction, a wading into the shallow end of the angelic pool. Now, let's go a little deeper to a story of desperation and survival. Let's find Hagar, Sarah's Egyptian maidservant. Her story is tangled up with Abraham and Sarah's. When Sarah couldn't conceive, she gave Hagar to Abraham, according to the custom of the time, to bear a child for her. But when Hagar became pregnant, the relationship soured. There was contempt, jealousy, and harsh treatment. So Hagar fled. She runs away into the desert, a pregnant, single woman with no resources and no destination, just running from the cruelty she's experienced. She finds a spring of water in the wilderness on the way to Shur. And there, the Bible says, the angel of the Lord found her. Think about that phrasing. He didn't just appear, he found her. It implies a search, an intention. In her moment of utter abandonment, when she felt most alone and unseen, she was being sought out. He asks her two questions. Hagar, servant of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going? He identifies her by her station, reminding her of her reality, but then asks her about her journey, her story. She gives a simple, defeated answer. I am fleeing from my mistress Sarai. She knows where she's from, but she has no idea where she's going. She is, quite literally, lost. The angel's instruction is hard. Return to your mistress and submit to her. This isn't what she wants to hear. It feels like a command to return to her prison, but it's followed by a promise, echoing the one given to Abraham. I will surely multiply your offspring so that they cannot be numbered for multitude. He then tells her about the son in her womb. He gives him a name, Ishmael, which means God hears, because, the angel says, the Lord has listened to your affliction. He even tells her what her son will be like, a wild donkey of a man, fierce and independent. In this encounter, Hagar is the one who names God. She is so moved, so seen, that she declares, You are a God of seeing. And she names the well Bir Laharoy, the well of the living one who sees me. For Hagar, the angel wasn't a source of terror, but of profound, life-altering recognition. In her deepest despair, a messenger from God found her, heard her, saw her, and gave her a future. She was afraid, yes, afraid of her circumstances, afraid of the future. But the angel met that fear not with a command, but with a promise and a name. He showed her that even in the wilderness, she was not invisible. Years later, Hagar is in the wilderness again. This time, she's been cast out for good, along with her young son, Ishmael. Their water is gone. She places the boy under a bush and walks away, because she cannot bear to watch him die. She sits and weeps, her heart utterly broken. This is a grief beyond words. And again, a voice comes. The angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, "What troubles you, Hagar? Fear not, for God has heard the voice of the boy where he is." There it is, our phrase, fear not. This time it's spoken from heaven, a voice without a visible form. It comes to a mother in the depths of her worst fear, the loss of her child. The angel tells her to get up, to lift her son and hold him fast, and repeats the promise that he will become a great nation. Then, the Bible says, God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. The well may have been there all along, but her grief had blinded her to it. The angelic word, the divine intervention, didn't just offer comfort. It opened her eyes to the provision that was right in front of her. The fear that was paralyzing her was met with a direct command, fear not, and a practical solution. It was a rescue. Hagar's story shows us a different facet of these divine messengers. They are not just announcers of impossible births to the patriarchs. They are finders of the lost, comforters of the desperate, and openers of eyes for those blinded by grief. The fear they address isn't just the terror of their presence, but the deep, existential fears that haunt the human heart. Now, let's turn up the intensity. Let's travel forward in time to the era of the Judges, a dark and chaotic period in Israel's history. The people of Israel are being cruelly oppressed by the Midianites. They've been so thoroughly beaten down that they hide in caves and dens in the mountains. When they manage to grow crops, the Midianites swarm in like locusts and destroy everything. The Israelites are starving, impoverished, and spiritually defeated. And in this context, we meet a man named Gideon. We don't find him on a battlefield, leading a valiant charge. We find him in a winepress, and he's not making wine. He's thrashing wheat. A winepress was a pit, often dug into the ground, a place where you could hide. He's beating out his meager grain in secret, hoping the Midianite raiders won't find him. This is a man defined by fear. He is the very picture of a victim. And it is to this man, in this hiding place, that the angel of the Lord appears. He doesn't just appear, he sits down under the oak tree at Ophrah, as if he has all the time in the world. He watches Gideon, and then he speaks. And his first words are so jarringly, almost comically, inappropriate that you have to wonder if the angel has a sense of irony. He looks at this terrified man, hiding in a hole, and says, "The Lord is with you, O mighty warrior." Mighty warrior. Gideon must have looked around to see who the angel was talking to. Me. You've got the wrong guy. I'm a mighty hider. I'm a professional thresher of wheat in unconventional locations. I am anything but a mighty warrior. The gap between the angel's greeting and Gideon's reality is a canyon. And Gideon's response is pure, undiluted bitterness. Please, sir, he says, with a tone that's dripping with sarcasm, if the Lord is with us, why then has all this happened to us? And where are all his wonderful deeds that our fathers told us about? He's essentially saying, save your pretty speeches. I've heard the old stories, and they don't match the world I live in. If God is with us, he has a funny way of showing it. He has abandoned us. This is raw, honest doubt. Gideon isn't just afraid of the Midianites, he's disillusioned with God. And the angel doesn't rebuke him. He doesn't chide him for his lack of faith. He meets Gideon's challenge with one of his own. Go in this might of yours and save Israel from the hand of Midian. The angel takes Gideon's current state, his fear, his doubt, his hiding, and calls it this might of yours. The message is profound. God is going to use you exactly as you are. Your weakness is the vessel for his strength. But Gideon is not convinced. He doubles down on his inadequacy. Please, Lord, how can I save Israel? Behold, my clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my father's house. He's from the weakest tribe, the weakest clan, the weakest family, and he's the weakest person in it. It's a fourfold confession of his own insignificance. He has a PhD in worthlessness, and the divine response comes again. But I will be with you, and you shall strike the Midianites as one man. The promise isn't that Gideon will suddenly become strong, but that God will be with him. That's the only qualification he needs. This is all too much for Gideon. He's had a conversation with a being who appeared out of nowhere, called him a mighty warrior, and is now commissioning him to defeat an unbeatable enemy. He needs proof. He needs to know that this isn't just a heat-induced hallucination. If I have found favor in your sight, then show me a sign that it is you who speak with me. He asks the angel to wait while he prepares an offering, a young goat, and some unleavened bread. It's an act of hospitality, much like Abraham's, but it's also a test. Gideon prepares the food and brings it out. The angel then gives him strange instructions. Take the meat and the unleavened cakes and put them on this rock, and pour the broth over them. It must have seemed bizarre, a waste of precious food, but Gideon obeys. Then the angel of the Lord reaches out the tip of the staff that is in his hand and touches the meat and the cakes, and fire flares up from the rock. It consumes the offering completely. And in that same instant, the angel of the Lord vanishes. He's just gone. Now, for the first time, Gideon understands. He wasn't talking to some wandering prophet or a strange traveler. He has been in the presence of a messenger from God himself, and his reaction is not relief. It is not joy. It is pure, unadulterated terror. Alas, O Lord God, for now I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face. He believes a death sentence has just been carried out. To see a divine being face to face in the ancient mindset was to die. Your mortal, fragile, sinful frame simply couldn't handle the exposure to such raw holiness. You would be consumed like the offering on the rock. He is completely undone by this realization. And it's in this moment of terror that God speaks to him directly. Peace be to you. Do not fear, you shall not die. There it is again, that crucial phrase. But notice the sequence. The terror comes first. The full-blown, I'm about to die panic attack happens after the angel is gone. It's the lingering aftershock, the dawning comprehension of what he has just experienced. The reassurance, do not fear, is the divine response to that specific, mortal terror of having brushed up against the holy. Gideon is so moved, so transformed by this terrifying, reassuring encounter that he builds an altar right there and names it, "The Lord is Peace." The man who was defined by fear, hiding in a hole, has a face-to-face encounter with a being so terrifying he thinks he's going to die. And the result is peace. It's a peace that comes not from avoiding fear, but by passing through it, by being met by God on the other side of it. The story of Gideon is a masterclass in the angelic encounter. It has the sudden appearance, the ironic and powerful message, the human doubt and skepticism, the supernatural sign, and the subsequent wave of mortal terror, all capped by that essential, life-giving command. Do not fear. Let's stay in the book of Judges for our next story, which is in many ways a companion piece to Gideon's. It's the story of the birth of Samson. Here, we meet a man named Manoah and his wife, who is barren. Once again, the angel of the Lord appears, but this time, he appears to the woman when she is alone in a field. He gives her a message that is both a promise and a strict set of instructions. Behold, you are barren and have not borne children, but you shall conceive and bear a son. He then lays out the rules for a Nazirite vow that the child must live by his whole life. He must never drink wine or strong drink, never eat anything unclean, and no razor shall touch his head. For the child shall be a Nazirite to God from the womb, and he shall begin to save Israel from the hand of the Philistines. The woman, whose name we are never given, hurries to her husband, and her description of the being she just met is telling. A man of God came to me, and his appearance was like the appearance of the angel of God, very awesome. The word there, awesome, doesn't mean cool or impressive in our modern, watered-down sense. The Hebrew word is yer, which means to be afraid, to be feared, to be revered. She is saying his appearance was terrifying. So terrifying, in fact, that she didn't even think to ask him his name or where he was from. She was too overwhelmed. Manoah, her husband, is intrigued and perhaps a bit jealous that he missed out. He prays, "O Lord, please let the man of God whom you sent come again to us and teach us what we are to do with the child who will be born." God hears his prayer. The angel appears again to the wife while she's in the field. She runs to get Manoah, who comes and immediately starts peppering the angel with questions. "Are you the man who spoke to this woman?" The angel simply replies, "I am." Manoah then re-asks all the questions about how to raise the boy. The angel patiently repeats the instructions he gave to the wife. Manoah, much like Abraham, now wants to show hospitality. Please let us detain you and prepare a young goat for you. He still thinks this is just a very impressive man of God. The angel's reply is another clue that he is something more. If you detain me, I will not eat of your food. This being does not need sustenance, at least not the kind mortals provide. Then he offers a suggestion. But if you prepare a burnt offering, offer it to the Lord. And the text adds a crucial parenthetical. For Mano did not know that he was the angel of the Lord. Mano is still operating on a human level. He asks one final, simple question. What is your name? So that we may honor you when your words come true. The angel's answer is one of the most mysterious and awe-inspiring in the entire Bible. Why do you ask my name, seeing it is wonderful? The Hebrew word for wonderful here is peli, which means incomprehensible, beyond understanding, miraculous. He's essentially saying, my name is too wonderful for you to comprehend. He is deflecting the question by stating his very nature. To name something is to have a measure of power or understanding over it. The angel is telling Mano, you can't put me in a box. I am from a category of being that your language cannot contain. Now it's starting to sink in for Mano. He proceeds with the offering. He takes the goat and the grain offering and places them on a rock. Then, as the flame from the altar goes up toward heaven, something incredible happens. The angel of the Lord ascended in the flame of the altar. He uses the fire as his chariot, his exit ramp from this world back to his own. Mano and his wife see this. They see a being ride a column of fire into the sky, and they fall on their faces to the ground. They are completely undone. The spectacle has shattered their categories of what is possible. And once the angel is gone, and they are left with the smoking rock and the smell of the sacrifice, Mano turns to his wife, his voice filled with that same terror we saw in Gideon. We shall surely die, for we have seen God. He makes the same assumption. To see a being this holy is to be marked for death. But his wife, who has now had 2 encounters with this being, is far more level-headed. Her logic is simple and beautiful. If the Lord had meant to kill us, she argues, he would not have accepted a burnt offering and a grain offering from our hands, or shown us all these things, or now announced to us such things as these. She reasons that a God who intended to destroy them wouldn't have gone to all the trouble of making a promise. The message of life, the promise of a son, overrides the fear of death. Her faith is more powerful than her fear. In this story, the be not afraid is not spoken by the angel, but by the wife. She becomes the messenger of reassurance to her terrified husband. But the core experience remains the same. The appearance is awesome and terrifying. The being is mysterious and beyond comprehension. The departure is a supernatural spectacle, and the human reaction is the certainty of imminent death. To meet an angel is to have your world unmade, and then, by God's grace, remade with a new, impossible promise at its center. Now let's leave the dusty, violent era of the judges and travel centuries forward into the world of the New Testament. The setting changes. we move from fields and wine presses to the heart of Israel's religious life, the great temple in Jerusalem. We meet an old priest named Zechariah. He and his wife, Elizabeth, are righteous and devout, but like Abraham and Sarah, and Manoah and his wife, they are childless, and now they are very old. Zechariah is a simple priest from a rural division. Serving in the temple was the highest honor of his life, and because there were so many priests, the opportunity to enter the sanctuary itself and burn incense before the Lord was a once-in-a-lifetime privilege, determined by casting lots. One day, the lot falls to Zechariah. This is the day he has dreamed of his entire career. He goes into the sanctuary of the Lord. Outside, in the courtyards, a crowd of worshipers is praying. Inside, Zechariah is alone in the holy place. The air is thick with the sweet, sacred smoke of incense. The light is dim, filtered through the heavy veil that separates this room from the most holy place. It is quiet, reverent. This is the closest a man like him can get to the direct presence of God on earth. And in that profound silence, an angel of the Lord appears to him, standing on the right side of the altar of incense. Zechariah is not in a field. He's not thrashing wheat in a winepress. He is a priest in the temple, performing his sacred duty. If anyone should be prepared for a supernatural encounter, it should be him. But the text is clear, and Zechariah was troubled when he saw him, and fear fell upon him. He wasn't just startled. Fear fell on him like a physical weight, like a heavy blanket that smothers and paralyzes. This was not the kind of experience his seminary training had prepared him for. And what are the very first words out of the angel's mouth? You already know. Do not be afraid, Zechariah, for your prayer has been heard. It's the classic opening line. Before the message comes the emergency emotional intervention. Calm down, breathe. Don't let your heart explode. Now listen. The angel, who we learn is named Gabriel, a name that means God is my strength, delivers the good news. His wife Elizabeth will bear a son. They are to name him John. He will be great before the Lord, filled with the Holy Spirit even from his mother's womb, and he will be the forerunner, the one who prepares the way for the Messiah. It is a message of staggering importance, not just for this old couple, but for the entire history of salvation. And Zechariah's response, once he gets over his initial terror, is doubt. It's the same doubt as Sarah's. How shall I know this? For I am an old man, and my wife is advanced in years. It's a reasonable question from a human perspective. He's looking at his own feeble body and his wife, and he's weighing them against the angel's incredible promise. The physical reality seems more solid than the angelic word. Gabriel's response is a stunning assertion of his own authority and the power he represents. I am Gabriel. I stand in the presence of God, and I was sent to speak to you and to bring you this good news. There's a hint of celestial indignation here. Do you have any idea who you're talking to? I don't just wander in off the street. I come directly from the throne room of the universe. My messages don't get fact-checked against human biology. Because of his doubt, Zechariah is given a sign, but it's also a judgment. And behold, you will be silent and unable to speak until the day that these things take place, because you did not believe my words, which will be fulfilled in their time." For 9 months, this priest, whose job involves speaking blessings and prayers, is rendered mute. His mouth is closed, a physical manifestation of his inability to speak a word of faith in response to God's promise. When he finally stumbles out of the sanctuary, the crowd waiting outside knows something has happened. He's been in there too long. He's pale, shaken, and he can't speak. He can only make gestures. They realize he has seen a vision. The encounter with Gabriel has marked him, physically and profoundly. The terror of the moment was so great that it literally struck him dumb. It's another powerful reminder that these are not gentle, comforting visitations. They are high-stakes, life-altering, and terrifying intrusions of the divine into the human sphere. Just 6 months later, the same angel, Gabriel, is sent on another mission. This time, he doesn't go to the great temple in the holy city of Jerusalem. He goes to a dusty, backwater town in Galilee called Nazareth, a town with a bad reputation, a place from which no one expected anything good to come. And he doesn't appear to an old, male priest performing a sacred rite. He appears to a young girl, a teenager, probably no more than 14 or 15 years old. Her name is Mary. She is a virgin, betrothed to a carpenter named Joseph. The encounter is intimate, private. He comes to her and greets her with words that have echoed through the centuries. "Greetings, O favored one, the Lord is with you." Mary's reaction is fascinating. The Bible doesn't say fear fell upon her. It says she was greatly troubled at the saying and tried to discern what sort of greeting this might be. She's not just scared, she's profoundly confused, troubled, disturbed. Her whole world has been tilted on its axis by this one sentence. "Favored one, the Lord is with me." What could this possibly mean? Her mind is racing. It's an intellectual and emotional turmoil, not just a visceral flight or fight reaction. Sensing her confusion, Gabriel speaks the line, "Do not be afraid, Mary, for you have found favor with God." Again, the reassurance comes before the main point. Settle your mind. Quiet your heart. What I am about to say is going to be even more world-tilting than my greeting. And then he delivers the most momentous message in human history. She will conceive and bear a son. She will call his name Jesus. He will be great and will be called the Son of the Most High. The Lord God will give him the throne of his father David, and he will reign over the house of Jacob forever, and of his kingdom there will be no end. It is a cascade of impossible, royal, divine promises, all being laid at the feet of this poor, unknown girl in a nothing town. And her question, unlike Zechariah's, is not one of doubt, but of practical inquiry. How will this be, since I am a virgin? She's not questioning if it can happen, but how. It's a question of mechanics, not belief. Gabriel's explanation pushes the boundaries of human language. The Holy Spirit will come upon you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. Therefore the child to be born will be called Holy, the Son of God. He speaks of a divine overshadowing, a creative act unique in all of history. He offers her a sign, not as a punishment for doubt, but as an encouragement to her faith. Her relative Elizabeth, the old and barren one, is already in her 6th month. For nothing will be impossible with God. And Mary's response is the perfect model of faith. No more questions, no more turmoil, just simple, beautiful, courageous submission. Behold, I am the servant of the Lord. Let it be to me according to your word. She says yes. She gives her consent to have her life completely and utterly upended to become the mother of God. In that quiet room in Nazareth, the terror and confusion of the angelic greeting gave way to a faith that changed the world. But we must not forget that it began with a moment of profound trouble, a moment so disorienting that the mighty Gabriel had to command her not to be afraid. Finally, let's go out into the fields near Bethlehem. It's night. The sky is dark. A group of shepherds, men on the lowest rung of the social ladder, are doing what they do every night, watching over their flocks. It's a boring, cold, thankless job. They are ritually unclean because of their work, so they couldn't even worship properly at the temple. They are nobodies, the forgotten. And it is to these men that the next angelic announcement comes. The text says, "And an angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them." This wasn't just a bright figure. It was the kabod, the glory, the manifest presence and weight of God himself, illuminating this drab hillside. Imagine the deepest darkness you've ever been in, and then imagine a light so pure and so powerful that it feels solid. It's not just something you see, it's something you feel. And the shepherds' reaction. They were filled with great fear. The Greek is even stronger. It's literally, they feared a great fear. It was terror magnified. It was the most fear a human being could possibly feel. They were probably flat on their faces in the dirt, hearts hammering, certain that the world was ending. And to these men, paralyzed by a great fear, the angel speaks the familiar words. "Fear not, for behold, I bring you good news of great joy that will be for all the people." The message is the antidote to the fear. The joy is the answer to the terror. He tells them of the birth of a Savior, Christ the Lord, in the city of David. He gives them a sign, not a spectacular miracle, but something humble and strange. You will find a baby wrapped in swaddling cloths and lying in a manger. And then, as if one terrifying, glory-radiating angel wasn't enough, suddenly there was with the angel a multitude of the heavenly host praising God. The sky is torn open. The single point of light becomes a choir of thousands, perhaps millions, of celestial beings, filling the night with their praise. Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace among those with whom he is pleased. The shepherds, who 5 minutes earlier were probably half asleep and shivering, are now spectators to a cosmic worship service. The heavens have opened up to a bunch of social outcasts on a hillside. The experience is so overwhelming, so far beyond anything they could have ever imagined, that it completely reorients their reality. When the angels depart, they don't just sit there, trembling. The message has overcome the terror. They say to one another, "Let us go to Bethlehem and see this thing that has happened." The fear has been transformed into urgent, active faith. So what have we learned from this tour of the Be Not Afraid crew? We've seen that angelic encounters in the Bible are not soft, pastel-colored events. They are raw, powerful, and reality-bending. They happen to the great and the small, to patriarchs and priests, to desperate women and terrified warriors, to young girls and forgotten shepherds. The beings who appear are awesome, mysterious, and so radiant with the holiness of the one they serve that the default human reaction is to be greatly troubled, to be filled with great fear, to assume that you are about to die. The phrase, "do not be afraid," is not a platitude. It is not a gentle suggestion to cheer up. It is a necessary, divine command that functions as a kind of spiritual defibrillator, shocking the human heart back into a rhythm that can actually receive the message that is about to be delivered. It's the bridge between two completely different orders of reality. It's the angel saying, "I know my very presence is unmaking you. I need you to hold together for a moment, because I have something to tell you that is going to remake your world." The angels of the Bible are not there to be our personal life coaches or to leave feathers on our path. They are messengers of the living God, emissaries from the throne room of the universe. They carry messages that redirect history, announce impossible births, and declare the arrival of the Savior. And their appearance is a preview of the power they represent. They are terrifying because holiness is terrifying to our mortal frames. They are awesome because the God they serve is awesome. So the next time you see a picture of a chubby cherub with a harp, perhaps you can smile and remember the shepherds, flat on their faces in the dirt, their ears ringing with the sound of a heavenly army, and the first words they heard from the light, "Fear not," because that is where the real story begins. In our last conversation, we spent some time together with the Be Not Afraid crew. We walked through those initial, often jarring encounters where a messenger from heaven appears, and the first order of business is to keep the human witness from fainting dead away. We saw that the terror they inspired wasn't from malice, but from a holiness so potent, a reality so different from our own, that it overwhelms our mortal senses. We established their primary role as messengers, the bearers of news that alters lives and redirects the course of history. But as we sat with those stories, a question may have begun to bubble up in your mind. Are they all the same? When the Bible speaks of an angel of the Lord, is it referring to a single type of being, a kind of celestial standard model? It's a wonderful question because it invites us to look closer, to notice the subtle and sometimes not so subtle differences in the descriptions we're given. And when we do, we discover that the heavenly realm is not a monolith. The Bible doesn't give us a neat, systematic field guide to celestial beings with tidy classifications and organizational charts. It's not a biology textbook. What it gives us are glimpses, snapshots taken by prophets and visionaries who were granted a brief, overwhelming look behind the curtain. And these glimpses suggest a world of staggering complexity and diversity. It seems that angel is more of a job description, messenger, than a single species. Under that broad title, there exists a whole host of different beings with different appearances, different functions, and different stations within the divine hierarchy. Tonight, we're going to meet some of them. We're going to move beyond the general role of messenger and look at the guardians, the worshippers, and the warriors of the celestial court. We'll meet the living creatures covered in eyes, the burning ones with 6 wings, and the great archangels who wage war in the heavens. So take a deep breath and let's approach the throne. Our first stop is with a group of beings you've probably heard of, but perhaps in a very different context. Let's talk about the cherubim. Now, that word, cherubim, probably conjures up the image we talked about before. The chubby, rosy-cheeked baby with tiny wings from Renaissance art, the kind you see on Valentine's cards. I want you to take that image, scrunch it up into a little ball in your mind, and gently toss it aside, because the biblical cherubim are just about the furthest thing from that image you could possibly imagine. They are not cute. They are not cuddly. They are formidable, powerful, and deeply connected to the holiness and sovereignty of God. We meet them for the very first time at the end of the very beginning, in a moment of profound sorrow. In Genesis chapter 3, Adam and Eve have disobeyed God. They have eaten from the one tree they were commanded to avoid. Paradise is broken. Trust is shattered, and they are exiled from the Garden of Eden. The sentence is pronounced, and they are sent out into a world that will now be marked by toil, pain, and death. And then, God does something to ensure the exile is permanent. The Bible says, He drove out the man, and at the east of the Garden of Eden, He placed the cherubim and a flaming sword that turned every way to guard the way to the tree of life. Let's just sit with that image. The first job we see the cherubim performing is that of an impassable sentinel. They are the divine bouncers at the door of paradise. Imagine Adam and Eve looking back with tears in their eyes at the home they have lost, the place of perfect communion with their Creator. And what do they see? Not just a closed gate, but living, celestial beings. The text doesn't describe them here, but their presence alone is a statement. And they are not alone. They are accompanied by a flaming sword that turned every way, a whirling, terrifying vortex of divine fire. There's no getting past this. The way back is barred by beings of immense power and a weapon of pure, living flame. Their role here is clear. They are the guardians of holiness. The tree of life represents a state of being, a connection to God's eternal life that humanity, in its fallen state, can no longer be allowed to access. The cherubim are there to enforce that boundary. They are the personification of the unbridgeable gap that sin has created between humanity and the sacred space of God's presence. Their first appearance on the biblical stage is as a symbol of separation and a monument to a lost intimacy. It's a somber, terrifying, and deeply majestic image. The next time we encounter the cherubim, their role as guardians of God's presence is made even more explicit. We're in the book of Exodus. God has rescued the Israelites from Egypt, and He is giving Moses the instructions for building the tabernacle, the portable sanctuary that will be the focus of Israel's worship in the wilderness. At the very heart of the tabernacle is a room called the Most Holy Place, and within that room is a single piece of furniture, the Ark of the Covenant. It's a golden box containing the tablets of the 10 Commandments. And God gives Moses very specific instructions for the lid of this box, the mercy seat. He says in Exodus 25, "You shall make 2 cherubim of gold, of hammered work shall you make them, on the 2 ends of the mercy seat. The cherubim shall spread out their wings above, overshadowing the mercy seat with their wings, their faces one to another. Toward the mercy seat shall the faces of the cherubim be." And then God says why this is so important. "There I will meet with you, and from above the mercy seat, from between the 2 cherubim that are on the ark of the testimony, I will speak with you." Here, the cherubim are not barring the way, they are marking the spot. Their golden, hammered forms define the very throne of the invisible God on earth. Their posture is one of worship and adoration, their faces turned down toward the mercy seat, where the blood of atonement would be sprinkled once a year. Their wings are spread out, creating a sacred space, a kind of tent of honor over the place of meeting. They are perpetually fixed in a state of reverence. When the high priest entered the most holy place on the Day of Atonement, he entered into a stone and fabric replica of the heavenly throne room, and the golden cherubim were a tangible reminder of the living, celestial beings who surround the true throne of God. They are still guardians, but here they are guarding and honoring the very point of connection between heaven and earth, the place of atonement and communion. These 2 glimpses are powerful, but they are also static. We see the cherubim as guardians and as golden statues, but what are they actually like? For that, we have to turn to the visions of the prophet Ezekiel. And here, I invite you to get comfortable, because we are about to journey into one of the strangest, most mind-bending passages in all of Scripture. Ezekiel was a priest living in exile in Babylon with his people, and in the 5th year of his exile, by the Chebar Canal, the heavens were opened, and he saw visions of God. What he saw is so other, so far beyond our normal experience, that his language strains at the seams to describe it. He begins with the approach. He sees a great storm cloud coming from the north, a whirlwind with flashing fire and brilliant light all around it. And in the center of the fire, he sees something like gleaming metal. This is not a gentle parting of the clouds. It is a dramatic, violent, and powerful arrival. And out of the fire, he sees the form of 4 living creatures. This is his first attempt to name them. He doesn't know the word cherubim for them yet. He just knows they are alive. And their appearance, he says, is that of a human being. But that's where the familiarity ends. Each of these 4 creatures has 4 faces and 4 wings. Their legs are straight, and their feet are like the hooves of a calf, gleaming like burnished bronze. Underneath their wings, on all 4 sides, they have human hands. Let's pause on the faces. Each creature had all 4 of them. On one side, the face of a man. On the right side, the face of a lion, on the left, the face of an ox, and on the back, the face of an eagle. The ancient commentators loved to ponder the meaning of this. They saw in it a representation of the pinnacle of all creation. The man represents intelligence and reason, the ruler of creation. The lion represents majesty and wildness, the king of the wild beasts. The ox represents strength and service, the king of the domestic animals. And the eagle represents speed and transcendence, the king of the birds. These beings, in their very form, seem to encompass and represent the fullness of the created order, all brought together in service to the one on the throne. They are the ultimate creature, embodying all the glory of the animal and human kingdoms. Their movement is just as strange. They move straight forward wherever the spirit would go. They don't turn. If they want to go right, they don't pivot. The face that is already pointing right simply becomes the front, and they move. Their movement is instantaneous, coordinated, and purposeful. Ezekiel says they darted to and fro like a flash of lightning, and their appearance is fiery. Among the living creatures, he says, there was something that looked like burning coals of fire, like torches moving to and fro among the creatures. And the fire was bright, and out of the fire went forth lightning. These are not static beings. They are a dynamic, blazing, energetic storm of life and light. Now, if that wasn't strange enough, Ezekiel looks down and he sees the wheels. Beside each of the 4 living creatures is a wheel on the earth, and the appearance of these wheels is like the gleaming of beryl, a shimmering sea-green stone. And all 4 wheels are alike, and their construction is, as it were, a wheel within a wheel. They don't just roll forward and backward. Because of this gyroscopic design, they can move in any of the 4 directions without turning. They move in perfect unison with the creatures. When the living creatures moved, the wheels moved beside them. And when the living creatures rose from the earth, the wheels rose. Why? Because, Ezekiel says, the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. They are not a vehicle that the creatures are driving. They are part of the same living, spiritual entity. And then he adds a detail that pushes the vision into the realm of the truly unsettling. The rims of these giant, terrifying wheels are full of eyes all around. Eyes, a symbol of awareness, of intelligence, of vigilance. These are not blind, mechanical objects. They are all-seeing. They are a manifestation of a vast, mobile, ever-watchful consciousness. In later Jewish mystical tradition, these wheels, the Ophanim, are sometimes considered a separate class of angel entirely. For Ezekiel, they are inextricably part of the cherubim. Above the heads of these 4-faced, 4-winged, lightning-fast creatures, and their all-seeing gyroscopic wheels, Ezekiel sees something else. A platform, a firmament. He says it was like the gleam of awesome crystal or terrible ice. It stretches out over their heads, and from beneath this platform, he hears the sound of their wings. It's not a gentle flutter. It is like the sound of many waters, like the sound of the Almighty, a sound of tumult, like the sound of an army. The sound of their movement is the sound of a thunderstorm, the sound of a waterfall, the sound of God's own voice, the sound of a raging battle. It is a deafening, terrifying roar, and above this crystal platform, there is a throne in appearance like sapphire, and seated on the throne is a figure with a human likeness. Ezekiel can't describe him directly. He can only talk about the fire and light that surrounds him. From the waist up, he was like gleaming metal enclosed in fire. From the waist down, he was like fire, with a brilliant light all around him. It was, he says, like the appearance of the bow that is in the cloud on the day of rain. A rainbow, the sign of God's covenant and mercy, surrounding this figure of unbearable, fiery glory. This, Ezekiel says, was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. And what is his reaction? The same as everyone else we've met. When I saw it, I fell on my face. This entire, complex, terrifying, and majestic vision, the four-faced creatures, the wheels full of eyes, the sound of a cosmic army, is a picture of the living throne of God. The cherubim are not just guardians, they are the bearers of the divine chariot. They are the mobile throne room. They carry the presence of God wherever the Spirit wills them to go. They are the infrastructure of divine glory. In a later chapter, Ezekiel sees a similar vision and finally makes the connection. He says, "These were the living creatures I saw by the Chebar Canal." And then he adds, "And I knew that they were cherubim." These are the cherubim of the Bible. Not plump bobbies, but the living, four-faced, all-seeing, lightning fast, thunder-voiced chariots of the God of the universe. They are the ultimate guardians and bearers of his holy presence. To see them is to see the vehicle of the Almighty, and it is enough to make a prophet fall on his face in terror and awe. Now, from the bearers of the throne, let's move even closer to the attendants who stand right beside it. Let's meet the seraphim. If the cherubim are strange and complex, the seraphim are intensely, purely fiery. Our one and only glimpse of them comes from another prophet, Isaiah, in the 6th chapter of his book. The setting is crucial. Isaiah says, "In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord." King Uzziah had been a good king, a strong king. He had reigned for over 50 years. His death would have plunged the nation into a state of uncertainty and fear. The throne of Judah was empty, and in that moment of earthly instability, Isaiah is given a vision of the true throne, the one that is never empty. "I saw the Lord sitting upon a throne, high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple." Isaiah is in the temple, and his prophetic sight is opened to see the heavenly reality that the earthly temple only points to. He sees God, not directly, but his majestic, enthroned presence, so vast that the hem of his garment fills the entire sanctuary. And then he sees them. Above him stood the seraphim. The name seraphim comes from the Hebrew root word saraph, which means to burn. It's the same word used elsewhere for a fiery, poisonous serpent. These are, quite literally, the burning ones. They are beings of pure, living fire. Isaiah tells us what they look like. Each had 6 wings, and the use of these wings is deeply symbolic. With 2, he covered his face. and with 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he did fly. Think about that. These beings, who exist in the very presence of God, use 2/3 of their God-given attributes for the purpose of humility. They cover their faces because they cannot look upon the unveiled glory of God. It is an act of profound reverence and adoration. They cover their feet, a gesture of humility and unworthiness in the ancient world, acknowledging the holy ground on which they stand. Only with the final third, with 2 wings, do they fly. Their service, their action, flows from a posture of overwhelming humility and reverence. And what do? They are the lead worshipers of the heavenly choir. Isaiah hears them calling to one another, back and forth, in an unending chorus. And their song has only one word, repeated 3 times for ultimate emphasis. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. Holy is a word we use a lot, but what does it really mean? It means other, separate, set apart. It describes God's absolute uniqueness, his transcendence, the fact that he is in a category all by himself. He is not just a bigger, better version of us. He is fundamentally different. And for the seraphim to cry, holy, 3 times is the ultimate statement of this truth. He is the holiest of holies. And as they cry this out, they also declare that the whole earth, our world, is filled with the evidence of this holy God's glory. The effect of their worship is seismic. Isaiah says, "And the foundations of the thresholds shook at the voice of him who called, and the house was filled with smoke." The voice of a single seraph is powerful enough to make the foundations of the heavenly temple tremble. Their worship is not a quiet, polite affair. It is powerful. It has substance. It shakes the very structures of reality. The smoke, reminiscent of the glory cloud that filled the tabernacle, is a sign of God's thick, tangible presence. And what is Isaiah's reaction to all of this? To seeing the enthroned king, to hearing the earth-shaking cry of the burning ones. It is the same reaction we have seen time and time again. It is utter undoing. "Woe is me," he cries, "for I am lost." Or more literally, I am coming apart. I am disintegrating. Why? For I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips, for my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. In the presence of the thrice holy God and the perfectly holy worship of the seraphim, Isaiah is crushingly aware of his own unholiness, his sinfulness. He focuses on his lips, the organs of speech. As a prophet, his mouth is his tool, his whole purpose, and he realizes that his mouth is fundamentally unclean, unfit for the presence of this king. Like Gideon, like Mano, he believes he is doomed. The exposure to such holiness must surely mean his death. But then one of the seraphim does something extraordinary. He is no longer just a worshiper. He becomes an agent of grace. Isaiah says, "Then one of the seraphim flew to me, having in his hand a burning coal that he had taken with tongs from the altar." The altar in the heavenly temple is the place of sacrifice and atonement. This coal is holy fire, fire that purifies. The seraph, a being of fire himself, cannot touch it with his own hand. He must use tongs. That's how holy it is. And this fiery being, with this coal of holy fire, touches Isaiah's unclean lips. It should have been an act of destruction, but instead, it is an act of purification. The seraph says, "Behold, this has touched your lips, your guilt is taken away, and your sin atoned for." The fire that should have consumed him instead cleanses him. The seraphim, then, are the fiery guardians of God's holiness, the lead singers in the heavenly choir, whose voices shake the foundations of creation. They model a worship of profound humility, and they act as agents of God's purifying grace, making a sinful human being fit to stand in the presence of the King and receive his commission. They are glorious, powerful, and utterly devoted to the holiness of the God they serve. So we have the cherubim, the living chariots of God's glory, and the seraphim, the burning worshippers around his throne. But the angelic realm also seems to have its commanders, its generals, its special envoys who are given names and specific, high-stakes missions. The Bible speaks of archangels, a term that means chief angel or ruling angel. And while the Bible only explicitly names one being with that title, tradition and other passages give us a glimpse of at least two of these great princes of heaven. Let's start with the one explicitly called an archangel. His name is Michael. This name is not a description, but a question that is also a battle cry. My child, who is like God? It is a challenge thrown down in the face of any power, any pride, any rebellion that would seek to exalt itself against the Creator. Michael is, first and foremost, a warrior. He is the commander-in-chief of the armies of heaven. We meet him in the book of the prophet Daniel. Daniel has been praying and fasting for 3 weeks, seeking understanding of a vision. Finally, a glorious angelic being appears to him, a being so overwhelming that Daniel's companions flee, and Daniel himself falls into a deep sleep. This angel, who may well be Gabriel, begins to speak, and he reveals something astonishing. He tells Daniel, "I have come because of your words, but the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days. Let's unpack that. This mighty angel, whose appearance can drain the strength from a prophet, was delayed for 3 weeks. And he was delayed not by a human king, but by a prince of the kingdom of Persia. This is a title for a powerful, evil spiritual being, a fallen angel, who exercises authority over the earthly kingdom of Persia. The angel is giving Daniel a look behind the scenes of history, revealing that the struggles of nations on earth are a reflection of epic battles in the spiritual realm. And how was this angelic messenger finally able to get through? He says, "Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me." Michael, a chief prince, had to be called in as reinforcement. His arrival broke the deadlock and allowed the messenger to reach Daniel. This little verse paints a stunning picture of ongoing spiritual warfare, with Michael playing the role of the heavenly heavy cavalry, the one you call when the opposition is too strong. The passage goes on to identify Michael as the great prince who has charge of your people, the people of Israel. He is their patron angel, their guardian and champion in the heavenly court and on the celestial battlefield. We get another strange, fascinating snapshot of Michael in the tiny one-chapter book of Jude in the New Testament. Jude is warning against arrogant and rebellious people, and he makes a curious comparison. He says, "But when the archangel Michael, contending with the devil, was disputing about the body of Moses, he did not presume to pronounce a blasphemous judgment, but said, 'The Lord rebuke you.'" This is an incredible little scene that references a story from a non-biblical but well-known Jewish text. The devil is apparently laying some claim to the body of Moses after his death, perhaps arguing that since Moses was a murderer, having killed the Egyptian, his body belonged to him. And Michael, the archangel, the commander of heavenly armies, is there to contest it. But look at how he fights. He doesn't get into a shouting match. He doesn't list the devil's sins. He doesn't rely on his own power or authority to win the argument. He simply deflects. He points to the ultimate authority. "The Lord rebuke you." Even in direct conflict with the source of evil itself, Michael's power is rooted in his deference to God. His strength comes from his humility. His battle cry, "Who is like God?" is also his strategy. He knows that no one is like God, including himself, and therefore the ultimate victory and the ultimate judgment belong to the Lord alone. The final and most dramatic picture of Michael is in the book of Revelation. In chapter 12, John sees a vision of a great war in the heavens. It is the definitive cosmic showdown. Now war arose in heaven, Michael and his angels fighting against the dragon. And the dragon and his angels fought back, but he was defeated, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven. Here he is, Michael the archangel, leading the entire host of loyal angels in a direct, all-out war against Satan, the great dragon, and his legions of fallen angels. This is not a subtle dispute over a body. This is for all the marbles, and Michael is victorious. The dragon is cast down from heaven. Michael is the one who, in the end times, finally purges the heavens of the rebellious presence of evil. He is God's general, the celestial champion who defends God's people and executes God's judgment against God's ultimate enemy. He is the embodiment of righteous power in the service of divine authority. If Michael is the great warrior, the other named archangel figure is the great messenger. His name is Gabriel, which means God is my strength, or God has shown himself mighty. We've already met him in our last session, but let's revisit him now in his specific role as a celestial specialist. While Michael fights battles, Gabriel delivers messages, but not just any messages. Gabriel is the trusted envoy for God's most intricate and world-changing revelations. He also appears in the book of Daniel. After Daniel sees a complex vision involving a ram and a goat, symbolizing future kingdoms, he is exhausted and confused. Then, he says, he hears a voice calling out, "Gabriel, make this man understand the vision." Gabriel is the divine interpreter, the one sent to unpack the mysteries of prophecy. He comes to Daniel, and again, his presence is overwhelming. Daniel falls on his face in a deep sleep, and Gabriel has to touch him and set him on his feet. He then proceeds to explain the entire timeline of the vision with perfect clarity. Later, When Daniel is praying for his people, Gabriel appears to him again in swift flight to give him skill and understanding about the famous prophecy of the 70 weeks, the divine timetable leading up to the coming of the Messiah. Gabriel is God's chosen revealer of the divine plan. And of course, this role reaches its absolute pinnacle in the New Testament. It is Gabriel who is sent to the temple to announce the coming of the forerunner, John the Baptist, to Zechariah. When Zechariah doubts, Gabriel asserts his incredible authority. I am Gabriel. I stand in the presence of God. This is not a boast. It is his resume. He is one of the few beings who has immediate, direct access to the throne room, and he has been sent from that very place on a special mission. And then, 6 months later, it is Gabriel who is entrusted with the single most important message ever delivered, the Annunciation to Mary. He is the one who gets to tell a young girl in Nazareth that she will be the mother of the Son of God. He is the herald of the Incarnation. So we have Michael, the warrior prince, and Gabriel, the master communicator. 2 distinct personalities, 2 distinct roles, operating at the highest levels of the angelic hierarchy. They give us a sense that angels are not interchangeable cogs in a machine. They are individuals with names, specific assignments, and unique relationships to the divine plan. So where does this leave us on our journey tonight? We started with the simple idea of an angel as a messenger. Now, our picture has become so much richer, so much stranger, and so much more magnificent. We have seen the cherubim, the composite creature, all-seeing, living chariots of God who guard the way to paradise and bear the throne of the Almighty. We have seen the seraphim, the 6-winged burning ones, who surround the throne in ceaseless, foundation-shaking worship of God's holiness, and who purify the unclean with heavenly fire. And we have met the great princes, Michael the warrior, who defends God's people and wages war against the dragon, and Gabriel the herald, entrusted with explaining the mysteries of prophecy and announcing the coming of the King. Whirled away from the gentle, placid angels of our greeting cards, isn't it? The biblical picture is one of a vibrant, complex, and sometimes terrifyingly other reality. It's a heavenly court teeming with different orders of beings, each with a unique role, each reflecting a different facet of God's infinite glory. Some worship, some guard, some fight, some carry messages. But all of them exist for one purpose: to serve and glorify the Lord of hosts, the one who sits on the throne. They are not the main characters in the story. They are the supporting cast, the magnificent stage dressing for the great drama of God's relationship with humanity. But their presence reminds us that the universe is far more wonderful and far stranger than we often imagine. There is more going on than meets the eye, and the air around us, in some mysterious way, is thick with the traffic of heaven. In our journey together so far, we have stood at a distance and marveled. We felt the ground shake with the thunder of the cherubim's wings. We've been warmed by the holy fire of the seraphim as they sing their unending, temple-trembling hymn. We've glimpsed the celestial generals, Michael and Gabriel, carrying out the high commands of the King of the universe. We have looked into a world of perfect order, of breathtaking beauty, and of unwavering, joyous service to the Creator. It is a picture of shalom, of peace and wholeness on a cosmic scale. And if you are anything like me, sitting with that image of heavenly perfection naturally gives rise to a difficult and profound question. If that is the reality of heaven, if that is the way things are supposed to be, then where did all of this mess come from? Where did the discord in the celestial symphony begin? Where did evil, suffering, and rebellion find their first foothold in a universe created by a perfectly good God? It's a question that has haunted philosophers and theologians and ordinary people for millennia. The Bible's answer is both simple and shattering. It suggests that the darkness was not an invading force from outside of creation. It didn't arise from some equal and opposite power to God, a cosmic yin to his yang. No, the biblical story traces the origin of evil to something far more intimate and far more tragic. It began as a corruption from within. It was a mutiny, a rebellion that began not on earth, but in the heart of one of heaven's own. The story of the origin of evil is, at its core, the story of when a good angel goes bad. This is a somber part of our journey tonight. There are no easy answers here, and the scriptures we will look at are veiled in poetry and prophetic imagery, requiring us to be gentle and careful in our approach. The Bible doesn't give us a single, straightforward chapter titled The Autobiography of a Fallen Angel. Instead, it gives us fragments, allusions, and powerful allegories that, when pieced together, paint a heartbreaking picture of cosmic treason. It's the story of a being of unimaginable light who chose to embrace the dark. A story of how the highest aspiration to be like God became the deepest and most damnable sin. So let's begin with the names. The being at the center of this tragedy is known by many titles. In the Old Testament, we meet him as Satan, a Hebrew word that isn't so much a name as a title. It means the adversary or the accuser. He is the celestial prosecuting attorney, the one who challenges and opposes. In the New Testament, he is often called the devil, from the Greek word diabolos, which means the slanderer. He is the one who lies, who twists the truth, who seeks to destroy reputations, especially God's reputation. But there is another name, the one most associated with his original, unfallen state, Lucifer. This name actually comes from the Latin translation of a single passage in the Old Testament, and it means light bearer or morning star. It speaks of a brilliance and a glory that once was, making the subsequent fall all the more tragic. To find the story behind this name, we have to go to the prophet Isaiah, chapter 14. Now, the immediate context of this passage is a taunt, a satirical song of lament directed against the earthly king of Babylon. This king was an arrogant, world-conquering tyrant, and Isaiah is prophesying his downfall. But as the prophet writes, the language he uses begins to soar. It becomes too grand, too cosmic, to apply to any mere mortal king. The arrogance described is more than human arrogance. The fall described is more than a political defeat. And so, for centuries, readers of the scripture have seen a dual meaning here. They have seen the prophet using the story of a primordial fall from heaven to illustrate the fall of this earthly king. He is saying to the king of Babylon, "Your pride is so great, your fall will be so complete, that it reminds me of another, even greater story of pride and ruin." Let's listen to the poetry of this lament. Isaiah sings, "How you are fallen from heaven, O day star, son of dawn. How you are cut down to the ground, you who laid the nations low." Stop there for a moment. Day star, son of dawn. In Hebrew, Helel ben Shahar. This refers to the planet Venus, the morning star. If you've ever been up before sunrise, you know the one. It is the brightest object in the morning sky. It shines with a brilliant, steady light, appearing to challenge the darkness just before the dawn. It seems to want to be the sun. It seems to want to rule the sky. But every single morning, its glory is erased. The moment the true sun appears over the horizon, the morning star vanishes, completely overwhelmed and rendered invisible by a greater light. It is the perfect metaphor for a created being of great brilliance who tries to rival the uncreated brilliance of God. And what was the sin of this day star? What was the root of his rebellion? Isaiah gives us a glimpse into his heart, quoting the 5 arrogant assertions that sealed his doom. He gives us the 5 "I will" statements of the great usurper. Listen to the escalating pride. First, he says, "I will ascend to heaven." This is the core ambition. It's a statement of dissatisfaction with his appointed place. He was already a heavenly being, but he was not content. He wants to go higher. He wants to leave his designated orbit of service and climb towards the center of all things. It's a rejection of his createdness. Second, he builds on it. "Above the stars of God, I will set my throne on high." The stars, as we've discussed, are often symbolic of the other angels. So this is not just a personal ambition, it's a political one. He doesn't just want to ascend, he wants to rule. He sees the other angels not as fellow servants of God, but as potential subjects to be ruled by him. He wants to establish his own throne, his own kingdom, in a place of authority over his peers. Third, he specifies the location of his desired throne. "I will sit on the Mount of Assembly in the far reaches of the north." In ancient Near Eastern mythology, the far north was the mythical dwelling place of the gods, the celestial mountain where the divine council met. For this being to declare his intention to enthrone himself, there is a direct claim to divinity. He is saying, "I will take my seat among the gods. I will be part of the ruling council of the universe." But he's not asking for a seat at the table. He's planning a hostile takeover. Fourth, his ambition soars even higher. "I will ascend above the heights of the clouds." In the Old Testament, clouds are consistently associated with the Shekinah glory of God, the visible manifestation of his presence. To ascend above the clouds is to attempt to go above the very manifestation of God's glory, to place himself in a superior position. He is no longer content to be a ruler of angels. He now wants to be above God's own glory. And finally, he states his ultimate blasphemous goal, the very heart of his sin. I will make myself like the Most High. And there it is. The creature wants to become the creator. He doesn't want to be a reflection of God's glory. He wants to be the source of his own. He doesn't want to be the morning star heralding the sun. He wants to be the sun. It is the absolute rejection of his identity as a created being and the ultimate act of cosmic pride. All sin, in some way, is a faint echo of this desire. To put our own will, our own desires, our own selves on the throne where God alone belongs. This fivefold declaration of independence is the essence of the fall. And the prophet Isaiah immediately shows the tragic, ironic result of this attempted ascent. The one who said, "I will ascend," is met with the divine response. But you are brought down to Sheol, to the far reaches of the pit. He aimed for the highest heights of heaven and earned for himself the lowest depths of the grave, the place of shadows and death. The passage goes on to describe the kings of the earth lying in state in their tombs, while his own body is cast out like a trampled corpse. The greatest ambition in the history of the universe leads to the greatest humiliation. The story of the light bearer is a cautionary tale written across the cosmos. Pride goes before a fall, and a desire to be God is the surest way to lose everything, including the glorious self you were created to be. This is a powerful, poetic, and tragic picture, and it is not the only one. The prophet Ezekiel, a contemporary of Daniel living in Babylon, gives us another prophetic lament that seems to look through an earthly king to a celestial tragedy. In Ezekiel chapter 28, the prophet is told to raise a lamentation over the king of Tyre. Like Babylon, Tyre was a city-state known for its immense wealth, its commercial power, and its staggering arrogance. Its king saw himself as a god. And so, God gives Ezekiel a song of sorrow to sing over him. And again, the language seems to burst the seams of any merely human description. God says to Ezekiel, "You are the signet of perfection, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty." Can you imagine a more glorious description? The signet of perfection. A signet ring was used to stamp a seal, to mark something with the king's authority and identity. This being was the very stamp of perfection. He wasn't just wise, he was full of wisdom. He wasn't just beautiful, he was perfect in beauty. This is a description of a creature at the absolute apex of creation. And where did this perfect being live? You were in Eden, the garden of God. This connects him directly to the primordial paradise, to the very beginning, to the place of open communion with God. This is not the story of some minor angel. This is a being who was present in the inner sanctum of creation. God continues describing his splendor. Every precious stone was your covering: sardius, topaz, and diamond, beryl, onyx, and jasper, sapphire, emerald, and carbuncle. And crafted in gold were your settings and your engravings. It's a cascade of jewels. His very being was adorned with the most beautiful and precious materials in creation. He wasn't just wearing jewels, they were his covering. He was a walking, living mosaic of light and color and priceless beauty. And then, Ezekiel reveals his specific role, his station in the heavenly court. You were an anointed guardian cherub. There's that word again. Cherub. We met them before. The living chariots of God's throne, the guardians of holiness. And this being was not just any cherub, he was an anointed one, a chosen, consecrated one. A guardian cherub. His job was to protect and to attend to the holiness of God. God says, I placed you, you were on the holy mountain of God. In the midst of the stones of fire you walked. He walked in the very heart of God's fiery glory. He had a position of unimaginable honor, intimacy, and trust. He was one of the highest, if not the very highest, of all created beings. And then comes the turn, the heartbreaking until God says, you were blameless in your ways from the day you were created, till iniquity was found in you. This is one of the most mysterious and profound statements in the Bible about the origin of evil. Iniquity, or sin, wasn't an external thing that attacked him. It wasn't something God put in him. It was found in him. It arose from within his own will. In a realm of perfect goodness, this perfect being, through the faculty of his own free choice, allowed a flaw, a rottenness, to take root in his heart. And what was the source of this iniquity? What watered that evil seed? Ezekiel tells us plainly. First, it was his trade. In the abundance of your trade, you were filled with violence in your midst, and you sinned. For the earthly king of Tyre, this was his commercial empire. For the celestial being, perhaps it refers to a kind of spiritual trafficking, a bartering for loyalty, a building of his own faction among the angels. He used his position not for service, but for self-aggrandizement. But the ultimate root was the same one we saw in Isaiah. It was pride. Your heart was proud because of your beauty. You corrupted your wisdom for the sake of your splendor. The very gifts God had given him, his perfection, his wisdom, his beauty, his splendor, became his downfall. He stopped looking at the giver and fell in love with the gifts. He began to worship himself. He looked at his own reflection in the cosmic mirror and decided that he was the one worthy of adoration. And in that moment of self-worship, his wisdom became corrupted. It was no longer used to glorify God, but to enhance his own splendor. It was wisdom turned into cunning, beauty turned into vanity, glory turned into vainglory. And the judgment, it is swift, decisive, and a mirror image of the judgment in Isaiah. So I cast you as a profane thing from the mountain of God, and I destroyed you, O guardian cherub, from the midst of the stones of fire. The very place of his honor became the scene of his exile. The one who walked among the stones of fire was cast out from them. He was profaned, made common, stripped of his sacred status. He lost everything: the anointing, the guardianship, the access to the holy mountain. All of it sacrificed on the altar of his own pride. Putting Isaiah and Ezekiel together, we get a tragic and compelling portrait of the fall. The highest angel, a guardian cherub of perfect beauty and wisdom, a morning star, becomes infatuated with his own glory. He decides he no longer wants to be a servant, but a master. He conspires to usurp the throne of God himself. And for this cosmic treason, he is cast out of heaven, his glory turned to shame, his name changed from light bearer to adversary. But the story doesn't end there. It seems he was not alone in his rebellion. He was a charismatic and powerful figure, and he managed to convince others to join his cause. The rebellion spread. We get a glimpse of this in the book of Revelation, in that same passage where we saw Michael the archangel leading the battle. John sees a vision of a great red dragon who is explicitly identified as that ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satan. And then John notes a crucial detail. His tail swept down a third of the stars of heaven and cast them to the earth. As we've seen, stars are frequently used in the Bible as a symbol for angels. This highly symbolic verse is traditionally understood to mean that when Satan fell, he took a third of the angelic host with him. It wasn't just a solo act of defiance. It was a full-blown civil war in heaven. A significant portion of the created celestial beings chose to follow the rebel leader rather than their creator. They chose to cast their lot with the morning star rather than the sun, and they shared his fate. Revelation 12 tells us that when the dragon was thrown down to the earth, his angels were thrown down with him. The New Testament confirms this in a few brief, chilling verses. The Apostle Peter, in his second letter, warns against false teachers and reminds his readers of God's unwavering judgment against rebellion, even at the highest levels. He writes, "For if God did not spare angels when they sinned, but cast them into hell and committed them to chains of gloomy darkness to be kept until the judgment." The Apostle Jude says something very similar. And the angels who did not stay within their own position of authority, but left their proper dwelling, he has kept in eternal chains under gloomy darkness until the judgment of the great day. These verses add another layer to the story. Not only were these rebellious angels cast out of heaven, but some, perhaps the leaders or those guilty of a particularly heinous sin, were immediately bound, imprisoned in a place the Greek text calls Tartarus, a term for the deepest, darkest abyss, where they await their final sentencing. The rebellion was real, the consequences were immediate, and a final, ultimate judgment is still to come. The freedom they chose was, in fact, the freedom to be eternally chained. So now we have a universe that is haunted. It is no longer just populated by God and humanity and the holy angels. Now there is a fifth column, a kingdom of darkness, populated by a powerful, intelligent, and malicious fallen cherub, and the legions of lesser angels who followed him into ruin. They have a new master and a new job description, and their work is a twisted, evil parody of the work of the holy angels. Whereas holy angels are messengers of truth, these fallen angels are agents of deception. This is their primary tactic. The devil is, as Jesus called him, the father of lies. We see this right from the beginning in the Garden of Eden. The ancient serpent from Revelation appears in Genesis as simply the serpent. And he comes to Eve with his timeless, insidious strategy. First, he casts doubt on God's word. Did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden? It's a subtle twist. God had given them permission to eat from every tree but one. The serpent makes God sound like a cosmic killjoy, a restrictive tyrant. He wants Eve to see God's one no as more significant than his 1,000 yeses. Second, he casts doubt on God's goodness. After Eve clarifies the command, the serpent moves to an outright lie and an attack on God's character. You will not surely die, he says, for God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. He is accusing God of holding out on them, of keeping them down out of jealousy and fear. He suggests that God's command is not for their protection, but for his own self-preservation. He is slandering God, living up to his name, Diabolos. He is painting the one who gave them life as a liar, who is withholding true life from them. He is, in essence, tempting Eve with his own original sin. You will be like God. He offers her the same ambition that led to his own damnation. And humanity, tragically, takes the bait. This is the playbook of deception that these fallen beings have been running ever since. They whisper lies about God's character, about his word, about our own identity, about what will truly bring us fulfillment. Whereas holy angels are worshipers, fallen angels seek to draw worship to themselves or to anything other than the true God. Satan's temptation of Jesus in the wilderness culminates in this very offer. After showing Jesus all the kingdoms of the world, he says, "All these I will give you if you will fall down and worship me." It is the height of his arrogance. The fallen light-bearer demands that the eternal light of the world bow down to him. Jesus' rebuke is swift and definitive. Begone, Satan, for it is written, "You shall worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve." And whereas holy angels are agents of protection, comfort, and healing, fallen angels, now often referred to as demons, are agents of accusation, affliction, and torment. We've already seen that Satan's very name means accuser. In the book of Job, we see him standing before God, accusing the righteous Job of serving God only because God has blessed him. He is constantly seeking to find fault, to point out our flaws, to argue before God that we are unworthy of his love and grace. Revelation calls him the accuser of our brothers, who accuses them day and night before our God. He is the voice of condemnation, the whisper of shame, the constant reminder of our failures. The Gospels are filled with accounts of Jesus encountering people who are tormented by these unclean spirits. They cause physical maladies, muteness, deafness, convulsions, and inhuman strength. They cause mental and spiritual anguish, driving a man to live among the tombs, crying out and bruising himself with stones. They are agents of chaos, destruction, and dehumanization. They seek to mar and destroy the image of God in humanity. But and this is the most crucial part of this whole somber story, in every single one of these encounters, the demons are utterly and completely powerless before Jesus. They may be powerful in comparison to us, but in the presence of the Son of God, they are terrified. They cry out. They recognize him immediately. "What have you to do with us, O Son of God? Have you come here to torment us before the time?" They know who he is, and they know that their time is limited and a final judgment is coming. They have to beg his permission just to enter a herd of pigs. A single word from Jesus is enough to silence them and cast them out. His ministry was, in many ways, a large-scale rescue mission, a one-man invasion of enemy-occupied territory. He demonstrated, time and time again, his absolute authority over this kingdom of darkness. So the story of when good angels go bad is a dark one. It is the Bible's answer to the question of where evil came from. It came from the free choice of a glorious being who chose himself over his Creator. It is a story of pride, envy, and a lust for power that fractured the cosmos and introduced rebellion and ruin into God's good creation. It gives a name and a face to the forces of deception, accusation, and destruction that we see at work in our world and in our own hearts. But it is not the final word. It is the dark backdrop against which the story of redemption shines all the more brightly. For the Bible makes it clear that while this fallen adversary is powerful, he is not all-powerful. He is a creature, not the Creator, and he is a defeated foe. The war that began in heaven was ultimately won, not by an angelic battle, but by the work of Jesus on a cross. His death and resurrection broke the power of sin and death and disarmed the principalities and powers of darkness. The light bearer chose darkness, but the true light of the world has come, and the darkness has not, and will not, ever overcome it. We have spent some time now in the high and lofty places. We've stood with prophets in the heavenly throne room, surrounded by the terrifying glory of the cherubim and the holy fire of the seraphim. We have even peered into the tragic darkness of a celestial rebellion, a story of pride, and a fall from unimaginable light. These are the grand, operatic movements of the biblical story of angels, tales of cosmic battles, earth-shaking worship, and history-altering announcements. They are magnificent, and they are overwhelming. They can also feel very, very distant. It's one thing to imagine Isaiah seeing the train of God's robe fill the temple. It's another to connect that to our own quiet lives, in our own ordinary rooms, on our own very normal nights. So tonight, I want to invite you on a different kind of journey. Let's come down from the holy mountain. Let's leave the heavenly throne room behind, and let's walk for a while on the dusty roads of the earth. Because the Bible tells us another kind of story about angels, a quieter, and in some ways, more mysterious one. It suggests that not all angelic encounters are accompanied by blinding light or the sound of 1,000 wings. It tells us that sometimes the messengers of God don't announce themselves at all. Sometimes they wear the plain, unassuming disguise of a human being. Sometimes they appear as nothing more than a stranger on the road, a weary traveler, a person in need. And in these quiet encounters, the test isn't whether you can withstand the terror of their presence, but whether you can recognize the sacred in the ordinary and show kindness to a stranger who might be far more than they appear. This is the story of angels who walk among us, their divinity hidden behind a veil of the familiar. It's a story that asks us to look at the world and at the people we meet with a different set of eyes. Our primary text for this journey, the foundational story, is one we have touched upon before, but now I want us to revisit it, to walk through it slowly and breathe its dusty air. Let's go back to the plains of Mamre, to Abraham's tent in the heat of the day. I want you to really try to feel the scene. It's midday in a hot, arid land. The sun is a merciless white disk in a bleached blue sky. The heat is not just a temperature, it's a physical presence. It presses down. It makes the air shimmer and dance over the parched ground. All of life has slowed to a crawl, seeking whatever meager shade it can find. The sheep are listless. The servants are likely resting. The world is quiet, save for the buzz of an insect or the sigh of a hot breeze. This is the ancient equivalent of a slow, sleepy Tuesday afternoon. There is nothing to suggest that this day will be any different from the 1,000 that came before it. And Abraham, now an old man, is sitting in the entrance of his tent. He is doing the only sensible thing one can do in such heat. He is staying still. He is resting in the shade, looking out over the landscape that has become his home. And the Bible says, he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, 3 men were standing in front of him. Let's just pause on the simplicity and the strangeness of that moment. There was no fanfare, no thunderclap, no whirlwind of fire like the one that would announce God to Ezekiel. One moment, the shimmering horizon is empty. The next, 3 men are simply there. How did they arrive? Did they walk up the path? If so, surely Abraham would have seen them coming. Did they just materialize out of the heat haze? The text doesn't say. It leaves us with the quiet mystery of their sudden presence. They are just standing there, like any other travelers who might be crossing the plains. And what is Abraham's reaction? He is old. It is hot. He has every excuse in the world to stay seated, to perhaps give a weary wave and let them pass by. But he doesn't. The moment he sees them, something is ignited in him. The text says he ran from the tent entrance to meet them. This is not the slow shuffle of an old man. This is an urgent, energetic, enthusiastic welcome. He runs. And as he reaches them, he bows low to the ground, his face in the dust. This is an act of profound respect, of honoring these unknown strangers as if they were kings. His words are a torrent of gracious hospitality. My Lord, if I have found favor in your sight, do not pass by your servant. Let a little water be brought, and wash your feet, and rest yourselves under the tree, while I bring a morsel of bread, that you may refresh yourselves, and after that you may pass on, since you have come to your servant. Let's break down this beautiful, ancient ritual. He offers them water to wash their feet. In a world of dusty roads and open sandals, this was the first and most essential act of welcome. It was a gesture of refreshment and respect, of washing away the grime of the journey and making the guest feel comfortable and clean. He offers them rest in the cool shade of the tree, and he offers them food. He calls it a morsel of bread, a classic bit of humble understatement. As we are about to see, what he prepares is anything but a morsel. The 3 men accept his offer. And now, Abraham's hospitality moves into high gear. He hurries into the tent to Sarah. Quick, he says, 3 seas of fine flour knead it and make cakes. 3 seas of flour is an enormous amount, somewhere around 22 liters, or 6 gallons. This is not a snack. This is enough bread to feed a small army. And it's not just any flour, it's fine flour, the best they have, the kind usually reserved for honored guests or special occasions. While Sarah gets to work on this mountain of dough, Abraham himself runs to the herd. The text is wonderfully specific. He selects a calf that is tender and good. Again, the best he has. Not some old, stringy goat, but a prime animal. And he gives it to his young servant, who hurries to prepare it. Then Abraham himself brings it all together. He takes the roasted meat, the fresh, warm bread Sarah has baked, and he adds curds and milk, the ancient equivalent of a full course meal with all the trimmings. And then comes the detail that I find most moving of all. And he stood by them under the tree while they ate. He doesn't just serve them and leave. He doesn't sit down with them as an equal. He stands at a respectful distance, attending to their needs, making sure they have everything they want. He, the great patriarch, the wealthy sheik, is acting as their personal waiter. He is giving them his time, his energy, his finest provisions, and his undivided, humble attention. So far, this is a beautiful story about kindness to strangers. But as the meal winds down, the story takes a turn. These are no ordinary men. One of them asks, "Where is Sarah, your wife?" It's a jarringly personal question. How do they know his wife's name? Strangers on the road should have no knowledge of his household. Abraham, perhaps a little taken aback, answers, "She is in the tent." And then, the one who asked the question, who the narrative now subtly identifies as the Lord, makes the promise that will change everything. "I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah your wife will have a son." Inside the tent, hidden from view, but listening intently, Sarah hears this, and she laughs. It's a quiet, internal, bitter laugh. A laugh of disbelief born from a lifetime of empty arms and the biological reality of a body long past menopause. It's the laugh of someone for whom hope has become a cruel joke. And the visitor, sitting outside under the tree, hears her silent laugh. He turns to Abraham. "Why did Sarah laugh?" he asks. And he quotes the very words she had thought to herself. "Shall I indeed bear a child now that I am old?" And then he poses a question that hangs in the air, a gentle rebuke to all human doubt. Is anything too hard for the Lord? This is the moment of revelation. This is no mere man. This is a being who knows names he shouldn't know, who makes impossible promises, and who can hear the silent thoughts of a woman hiding inside a tent. The supernatural has broken through, not in a flash of fire, but in a quiet, perceptive question over the remnants of a meal. Sarah, now terrified at being so completely exposed, lies. "I did not laugh." The reply is calm, patient, and all-knowing. "No, but you did laugh." He doesn't condemn her. He just states the truth. This encounter is the archetype of entertaining angels unawares. Abraham didn't offer hospitality because he suspected his guests were divine. He offered it because that was his character. He saw 3 strangers in need, and he gave them his absolute best, holding nothing back. And because of his character, because of his open-hearted, open-handed welcome to the stranger, he received an open-hearted, open-handed promise from God. He welcomed 3 travelers and ended up dining with the Lord and his angelic companions. The story teaches a profound lesson. Sometimes, the most sacred encounters happen on the most ordinary of days, and they are unlocked by the simple key of kindness. Now, let's follow 2 of these angelic travelers as they continue their journey. The sun is beginning to set, and they leave Abraham and head toward the wicked city of Sodom. And here, we find a story that is the dark and tragic mirror image of the one we have just witnessed. Lot, Abraham's nephew, is sitting in the gate of Sodom. The city gate was the center of civic life, the place where business was done and judgments were made. And as evening falls, the 2 angels, still appearing as men, arrive. Lot sees them, and like his uncle, he is moved by the spirit of hospitality. He gets up to meet them, he bows with his face to the ground, and he makes a similar offer. "My lords, please turn aside to your servant's house and spend the night and wash your feet. Then you may rise up early and go on your way." But their response is different from the one Abraham received. They refuse. "No," they say, "we will spend the night in the town square." This is a test, not of Lot, but of the city. In a decent society, leaving travelers to sleep in the open square would be a source of public shame. Lot knows that Sodom is not a decent society. He knows the profound danger these 2 handsome strangers would be in. So he insists. The text says he pressed them strongly. He pleads with them, and finally they relent and go with him to his house. Lot, like Abraham, prepares a feast for them. He bakes unleavened bread, and they eat. For a brief moment, it seems that this story might follow the same pattern of blessed hospitality. But then, the depravity of the city comes knocking. The Bible says that before they lay down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, both young and old, all the people to the last man, surrounded the house. This is a chilling detail. It wasn't just a few rogue troublemakers. It was the entire male population of the city, from the youngest to the oldest. It was a complete and total societal breakdown. And they pound on the door, and they shout to Lot, "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us, that we may know them." The word "know" here is a euphemism for a brutal, violent, sexual assault. This is the absolute antithesis of Abraham's welcome. Hospitality is the sacred duty to protect your guest. The men of Sodom see the guest not as someone to be protected, but as an object to be violated. Their sin is not just a private vice. It is a public, violent, and complete rejection of the most basic laws of human decency and kindness. The stranger is not safe in their midst. Lot, in a desperate and morally horrific attempt to protect his guests, offers the mob his own 2 virgin daughters instead. It's a shocking moment that shows how deeply the city's corruption has warped even this righteous man's thinking. The mob, of course, refuses. They are not interested in women. They turn on Lot, threatening to do worse to him than to his guests, and they surge forward to break down the door. And it is in this moment that the angel's human disguise is dropped. The two men inside the house reach out, pull Lot back inside, and shut the door. And then, with a flash of supernatural power, they strike the entire mob outside with blindness. 1 minute, these men are a raging, bloodthirsty lynch mob. The next, they are stumbling around, groping for a doorway they can no longer find. The text says they wore themselves out trying to find the door. It's a pathetic and terrifying image of a people so consumed by their own violent passions that they are struck blind by the very holiness they are trying to assault. Now, the tone inside the house changes completely. These are no longer just guests in need of protection. They are powerful beings on an urgent mission. They turn to Lot. Have you anyone else here? Sons-in-law, sons, daughters, or anyone you have in the city? Bring them out of the place, for we are about to destroy this place, because the outcry against its people has become great before the Lord, and the Lord has sent us to destroy it. They reveal their true identity and purpose. They are agents of divine judgment, but they are also agents of rescue. Lot's act of hospitality, flawed as it was, has secured for him and his family a way out. He runs to warn his sons-in-law, but they think he is joking. They cannot conceive that their way of life is about to come to a fiery end. As dawn breaks, the angels become even more urgent. Up, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, lest you be swept away in the punishment of the city. But Lot hesitates. He lingers. He is attached to his home, his possessions, his life in this wicked place. And so, the angels do something extraordinary. The Bible says, the men seized him and his wife and his 2 daughters by the hand, the Lord being merciful to him, and they brought him out and set him outside the city. They physically dragged them to safety. Their role as rescuers is active, forceful, and merciful. They save Lot from himself. The contrast between the 2 stories is stark and deliberate. Abraham welcomes the strangers, and his household is promised a future, a legacy, a son of laughter. Sodom violently rejects the strangers, and the entire city is wiped from the face of the earth in a storm of fire and sulfur. The test in both cases was the same. How will you treat the stranger at your gate? And the answer to that question brought either a blessing that echoed down the generations, or a judgment that was swift and absolute. It suggests that our capacity for simple human kindness is, in God's eyes, a matter of life and death. These 2 stories from Genesis are the pillars of the theme, but there are other, stranger glimpses of angels moving unseen through the world. Take the wonderfully quirky story of Balaam and his donkey from the book of Numbers. Balaam is a non-Israelite prophet who has been hired by a foreign king to curse the people of Israel. He sets out on his journey, and the Bible says, God's anger was kindled because he went, and the angel of the Lord took his stand in the road as his adversary. The word for adversary here is in Hebrew, Satan. This is not the Satan, the great deceiver, but an angel acting as an adversary, an obstacle sent by God to block Balaam's path. And here's the twist. Balaam, the great prophet, the man who supposedly has spiritual sight, is completely blind to this celestial being standing in his way with a drawn sword. But his donkey, the donkey sees the angel perfectly. The first time the angel is in an open field, the donkey veers off the road to avoid him. Balaam, seeing only a disobedient animal, beats the donkey to get her back on the road. The second time, the angel stands in a narrow path between two vineyard walls. The donkey, with nowhere to turn, presses up against the wall, crushing Balaam's foot. Again, Balaam beats her. The third time, the angel stands in a place so narrow that there is no room to pass at all. The donkey simply lies down under Balaam. Balaam is furious. He is beating his donkey for the third time when the Lord opens the donkey's mouth, and she speaks. "What have I done to you, that you have beaten me these 3 times?" A talking donkey. That alone should have been enough to make Balaam pause. But he is so consumed by his anger that he gets into an argument with his own animal. And only then does the Lord open Balaam's eyes, and he sees him, the angel of the Lord, standing in the way with a drawn sword in his hand. And Balaam bows his head and falls on his face. The angel rebukes him. "Why have you beaten your donkey these 3 times? Behold, I have come out to oppose you, because your way is perverse before me. The donkey saw me and turned aside from me these 3 times. If she had not turned aside from me, I would surely have killed you by now and let her live." It's a story full of gentle humor, but with a profound point. The spiritual world is not always visible to the so-called experts. A humble, simple animal had more spiritual perception than the famous prophet. It reminds us that angels can be at work in our lives in ways we do not see. An obstacle, a frustration, a sudden change of plans that makes no sense to us might just be an angel with a drawn sword, standing in our path to protect us from a direction we should not go. We might be cursing the donkey in our lives, blind to the fact that it is the very thing that is saving us. Then there is the encounter Joshua has just before the great battle of Jericho. He is the new leader of Israel, surveying the city, the weight of the upcoming conquest on his shoulders. And he lifts up his eyes and sees a man standing opposite him. This man is not just standing there. He has a drawn sword in his hand. He looks like a soldier, a warrior. Joshua, being a good general, immediately challenges him. "Are you for us or for our adversaries?" It's a straightforward question. Whose side are you on? The man's answer is stunning. "No," he replies. He refuses to be put into Joshua's categories. He is not choosing between the Israelites and the Canaanites. He is announcing a higher reality. "But I am the commander of the army of the Lord. Now I have come." He is revealing that the battle to come is not just a human conflict. It is a spiritual one, and he is in charge. He is the general, and Joshua is merely a foot soldier. The proper response is not to ask whose side he is on, but to get on his side. And to prove his identity, he gives a command that echoes back to the holiest moment in Israel's history. "Take off your sandals from your feet, for the place where you are standing is holy." These are the very words God spoke to Moses from the burning bush. Joshua understands immediately. He falls on his face to the earth and worships. He asks, "What does my Lord say to his servant?" He has gone from being the commander to being the servant. This being appeared as an ordinary man, a soldier. But he was the very captain of the angelic hosts, a being of such holiness that the ground on which he stood became a sanctuary. All of these stories of Abraham's welcome, Lot's rescue, Balaam's redirection, and Joshua's submission feed into one beautiful, summarizing verse in the New Testament. In the letter to the Hebrews, the author is giving a series of practical instructions for Christian living. And tucked in among them is this little gem in chapter 13, verse 2. Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unawares. This one sentence takes all of those Old Testament stories and transforms them from ancient history into a living, breathing principle for all time. Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers. It is a command, an encouragement to a specific virtue, a virtue that, as we have seen, was of life and death importance. And why should we do this? For thereby some have entertained angels unawares. The key word is unawares, without knowing it. The point is not to develop some kind of angelic radar, to try and guess which stranger at the bus station is secretly a celestial being. That would miss the point entirely. The point is to treat every stranger with the kind of dignity, respect, and kindness you would show to an angel, precisely because you don't know. The blessing is not reserved for the one who correctly identifies their angelic guest. Abraham didn't get the promise of a son because he figured out who his visitors were. He got the promise because he ran to welcome 3 dusty travelers when he could have stayed resting in the shade. The hospitality came first, born from his character. The revelation came later as a result of that hospitality. This verse democratizes the sacred encounter. It tells us that we don't have to be a great patriarch like Abraham or a prophet like Joshua to have a brush with the divine. The opportunity might come to us in the form of a family needing directions, a homeless person asking for a meal, a new neighbor who feels lonely and isolated, a refugee seeking shelter. The person who comes to our door or who we meet on our path might be just that, a person, or they might be more. The principle of heaven is to treat them as if they are more, just in case. It infuses the mundane with a sense of wonder. The simple act of pouring a glass of water, offering a meal, giving a word of welcome, can become a sacred act. It asks us to live with our eyes open to the possibility of mystery in the mundane. It challenges our modern, disenchanted worldview and invites us to live as if the world is still enchanted, as if the veil between heaven and earth is thin, as if angels still walk our dusty roads. So while we have marveled at the great and glorious manifestations of angels, the fiery, multi-winged beings of the throne room, perhaps these quieter stories are, in their own way, even more challenging and more beautiful. The fiery cherubim demand our awe. The disguised traveler demands our character. It's one thing to fall on your face when the sky rips open with the glory of God. It's quite another to get up out of your comfortable chair on a hot and sleepy afternoon to run and welcome a stranger who has nothing to offer you. One is a reaction to overwhelming power. The other is a choice born from a heart of love. And it is in that quiet choice that we may find ourselves, without even knowing it, in the company of angels. And so, we come to the final leg of our long journey together. We began in the fields with terrified shepherds, shielding their eyes from a light so glorious it brought them to their knees, their ears ringing with the essential angelic greeting, "Fear not." From there, we were granted a glimpse into the celestial throne room, a place of dizzying wonder, populated by the fiery, six-winged seraphim and the four-faced, all-seeing cherubim. We then descended into the sorrowful shadows to trace the tragic story of a rebellion in heaven, of a great light-bearer who chose darkness and led a legion in a fall from grace. And just last time, we came back to earth, walking its dusty roads, learning that sometimes the most profound encounters with heaven happen not in a spectacular vision, but in the quiet, humble act of showing kindness to a stranger. We have covered a lot of ground. We have tried to listen closely to the stories the Bible tells, to see the picture it paints of these mysterious, powerful, and awe-inspiring beings. But our exploration would not be complete if we did not acknowledge that, for most of us, our ideas about angels have been shaped by more than just the pages of ancient scripture. They have been colored by centuries of art, by poetry, by beloved films, by greeting cards, and by the sweet, comforting stories we tell each other to make sense of the world and the life to come. An entire folklore has grown up around angels, a rich and beautiful tapestry of popular belief. And so tonight, in our final session together, I want to gently take some of these popular threads and hold them up to the light of the texts we've been exploring. This is not an exercise in cold, heartless debunking. The myths we have about angels exist for a reason. They speak to our deepest hopes and our most profound fears. They offer comfort. They give a sense of personal connection to the divine, and they bring order to the unknown. My goal is not to tear down anything that brings a person comfort. Rather, it is to see if, by clearing away some of the folklore, we might uncover a reality that is even more robust, even more mysterious, and ultimately, even more comforting and awe-inspiring than the myths themselves. So let's take a look at a few of our most cherished ideas about angels, starting with the one that we so often hear in times of grief. Let's explore the beautiful, tender, and incredibly common idea that when we die, we become an angel. We see it everywhere. On social media, when someone passes, a friend might post, "Heaven gained another angel." In movies, a character dies, and we see them in the afterlife, learning to use their new wings. The classic film, It's a Wonderful Life, hinges on the idea of a sweet old man, Clarence, trying to earn his wings. It is a powerful and deeply comforting thought. The idea that our loved ones are not gone, but have been transformed, promoted, graduated into a higher state of being, where they can now watch over us, is a balm to to the raw wound of grief. It gives our loss a sense of purpose and a beautiful, heavenly destination. It's an idea born of love, and it's one we must approach with the utmost gentleness. And yet, if we are listening carefully to the biblical story, we discover that it tells a different, though no less hopeful, tale. The Bible presents angels and human beings as two distinct, beautiful, and separate creations of God. They are not two stages in a single life cycle, where one graduates to become the other. They are, from the very beginning, different kinds of beings with different origins and different destinies. The angels, as we've seen, are spiritual beings created by God for his service. The book of Job, in a magnificent chapter where God is speaking out of a whirlwind, gives a hint about their ancient origins. God asks Job, "Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? When the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy?" Morning stars and sons of God are widely understood as poetic terms for angels. This verse suggests that the angels were already in existence, already a joyful, singing heavenly host when the foundations of our physical world were being laid. They are an older creation, witnesses to the birth of our world. Humanity, on the other hand, comes later in the Genesis account, and we are created with a unique status and purpose. God says, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness." This is a dignity that is never ascribed to the angels. We are created to be the image bearers of God within the physical creation, to be his viceregents, his stewards of the earth. The psalmist reflects on this unique position in Psalm 8, a beautiful poem about humanity's place in the cosmos. He looks up at the stars and is humbled, asking God, "What is man that you are mindful of him?" And he answers his own question with a sense of wonder. "Yet you have made him a little lower than the heavenly beings," or, as the older translation says, "a little lower than the angels, and crowned him with glory and honor. You have given him dominion over the works of your hands." We are a different order of being. Lower, perhaps, in our current mortal state in terms of power and spiritual perception, but crowned with a unique glory and given a unique role. We are the bridge between the spiritual and the physical, made from the dust of the earth and breathed into by the Spirit of God. And this distinction continues even after death. According to the central hope of the Christian faith, the destiny of a human being who has died in faith is not to become an angel, but to be resurrected. This is a crucial and often misunderstood idea. The ultimate hope is not to shed our bodies and become pure, disembodied spirits forever. The hope is in the resurrection of the body. The Apostle Paul spends an entire glorious chapter in his first letter to the Corinthians trying to explain this mystery. He talks about how our mortal bodies are like seeds, planted in the earth at death, and what will be raised is a new kind of body, a spiritual body. It will be physical, recognizable, but also glorified, imperishable, and powerful, perfectly suited for life in a new heaven and a new earth. Our destiny is not to become something other than human. It is to become fully human, restored to the glorious physical spiritual state that God intended for us from the beginning, free from sin, decay, and death. Jesus himself touches on this distinction. When the Sadducees, who didn't believe in the resurrection, try to trap him with a riddle about a woman who had 7 husbands, Jesus corrects them. He says, "You are wrong, because you know neither the Scriptures nor the power of God. For in the resurrection, they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like the angels in heaven." Notice what he says. He says we will be like the angels in one specific respect. Our resurrected human relationships will transcend the institution of marriage as we know it. He does not say we will be angels. The comparison highlights a similarity, but it rests on the assumption that we remain 2 distinct categories of being. In fact, some passages in the New Testament suggest that humanity's ultimate destiny is not to become angels, but to have a position of authority even over them. It's a stunning thought. Paul, in that same letter to the Corinthians, is chiding them for taking each other to court before pagan judges. And he makes this incredible argument. Do you not know that the saints will judge the world? Do you not know that we are to judge angels? The letter to the Hebrews spends 2 entire chapters arguing that Jesus, in his humanity, is superior to all angels, and that in his work, he has brought many sons, human beings, to glory. The destiny of redeemed humanity is to be co-heirs with Christ, to share in his glorious reign. This is a destiny unique to us. So why does this distinction matter? Is it just theological hair-splitting? I don't think so. To say that our destiny is to be resurrected humans, not angels, is to place an immense value on what it means to be human. It means that our bodies are not just disposable shells for our souls. They are an integral part of who we are, and God's plan is to redeem and glorify them, not discard them. It means that our lives, our relationships, our identities as men and women are not erased after death, but are perfected and brought to their true fulfillment. It means that when you grieve a loved one, you can have hope in the promise that you will see them again, not a transformed angelic version of them, but them in a glorified body, recognizable and whole. The hope of the resurrection is not that we become something else. It's that we become our true selves, finally and forever. It's a different kind of comfort, perhaps, than the idea of gaining wings. But it is a deep, profound, and wonderfully human hope. Now let's turn to another very popular and beloved idea, the personal guardian angel. This is the angel from the Christmas ornament, the one from the paintings of a beautiful winged figure guiding 2 small children across a rickety bridge. It's the idea that each and every one of us has a specific angel assigned to us from birth, a celestial bodyguard whose entire job is to watch over us, protect us from harm, and guide our steps. This is, again, an incredibly comforting thought. In a world that can feel chaotic, impersonal, and dangerous, the idea that there is a specific being in the universe whose sole focus is my personal well-being is deeply appealing. It makes us feel seen, known, and personally protected. So what does the Bible have to say about this? First, let's be clear. The Bible is absolutely full of the truth that angels have a protective ministry towards God's people. This part of the belief is entirely biblical. The passages are numerous and powerful. The most famous is from Psalm 91, that great poem about dwelling in the shelter of the Most High. It promises, "For he will command his angels concerning you to guard you in all your ways. On their hands they will bear you up, lest you strike your foot against a stone." This is a magnificent promise of divine protection carried out by angelic hands. It's so powerful, in fact, that Satan himself quotes it to Jesus during the temptation in the wilderness. Another beautiful verse is from Psalm 34. "The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him and delivers them." The image here is not of a single bodyguard, but of an entire military encampment. The angel of the Lord, a term that sometimes refers to a specific, high-ranking angel or even a pre-incarnate appearance of Christ, sets up a perimeter, a defensive circle around the faithful. It's an image of comprehensive, powerful protection. And we have the stories. We have the angel who came to Peter in prison in the book of Acts. Peter is chained between two soldiers behind locked gates, awaiting execution. And an angel appears in the cell, fills it with light, pokes Peter in the side to wake him up, and leads him out. The chains fall off. The gates open by themselves. This is a clear, dramatic, and personal angelic rescue. So the Bible is in full agreement that angels protect, guard, and deliver. The question is about the specifics. Does the Bible teach that each person has one permanently assigned personal guardian angel? Here, the evidence becomes much, much thinner. In fact, there is only one verse in the entire Bible that comes close to supporting this idea. It's in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 18. Jesus has just called a little child into the midst of his disciples and has warned them about the severe consequences of causing a child to stumble. And then he says this, "See that you do not despise one of these little ones. For I tell you that in heaven, their angels always see the face of my Father, who is in heaven." This is a beautiful and mysterious verse. Jesus is affirming the immense value and dignity of children in the eyes of God. And he says that their angels are in a position of constant, intimate communion with the Father. This certainly suggests a special, dedicated angelic care for children. But we have to be careful not to build an entire, elaborate system on this one verse. Does their angels mean that each child has one angel? Or does it mean that children, as a category of the most vulnerable and precious, have a whole host of angels assigned to their general care and advocacy in the heavenly court? Does this protection extend throughout their entire life? Or is it a special provision for the helplessness of childhood? The Bible doesn't specify. What we can say for sure is this: God assigns angels to protect the vulnerable, especially children. But the idea that every single human being has a single angel assigned to them for life is an inference, a tradition that has grown up around this one verse. It's not something that is explicitly taught anywhere else. So have I just taken away your guardian angel? I hope not. In fact, I would like to suggest that the biblical reality is even grander and more wonderful than the popular myth. The myth gives you one bodyguard. The Bible, however, suggests that you have the entire, inexhaustible resources of the heavenly host at your disposal. God's angelic army is not parceled out one by one. It is a vast, fluid, and mighty force that can be deployed according to his will and our need. Think of the story of the prophet Elisha and his servant in 2 Kings. The Aramean army has surrounded their city. Elisha's servant wakes up, sees the enemy host, and is terrified. "Alas, my master, what shall we do?" And Elisha speaks his famous, faith-filled words, "Do not be afraid, for those who are with us are more than those who are with them." Then he prays, "O Lord, please open his eyes that he may see." The Lord opens the young man's eyes, and he saw. And behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. Elisha didn't just have one guardian angel. He and his servant were surrounded by an entire army of them, a celestial cavalry of fire. The biblical picture isn't one of limited, individual assignments. It's one of overwhelming, abundant, and dynamic provision. At any given moment, you may be protected by one angel, or 10, or 10,000. Their protection might be as dramatic as leading you out of a prison, or as subtle as the unseen obstacle that prevents you from turning down the wrong road. The comfort of the Bible is not that you have an angel, but that you have a God who commands his angels in whatever number and in whatever manner is needed to guard you in all your ways. The reality is not a personal bodyguard, but a heavenly army dispatched by a loving Father for the care and protection of his children. Finally, let's touch on a few of the more visual myths. What do angels actually look like? Do they have genders? And what about those wings and halos? Our popular culture gives us a wide range of images. We have strong, masculine warrior angels and soft, graceful, feminine-looking angels. The Bible, for its part, is surprisingly consistent on this. Every time an angel is referred to with a gendered pronoun or appears in a form that is described in gendered terms, it is always masculine. Michael and Gabriel are masculine names. The visitors to Abraham and Lot were perceived as men. The angel at the tomb is a young man. Now, does this mean that angels have a biological gender as we understand it? Almost certainly not. As spiritual beings, they are likely beyond our categories of male and female. The consistent use of masculine language is probably a feature of the patriarchal cultures in which the Bible was written, where the masculine form was used to convey authority, strength, and action. So while they are always depicted as male, it's probably best to think of them as beings who transcend gender, but who present themselves in a form that conveys power and authority. And what about wings? Does every angel have a pair of feathery white wings? We have already seen that this is not the case. The seraphim have 6 wings. The cherubim in Ezekiel's vision have 4. But the vast majority of angelic encounters in the Bible involve beings who look just like ordinary men. Gabriel's appearances to Daniel, Zechariah, and Mary have no mention of wings. The angels who visited Abraham and Lot ate a meal and washed their feet, there is no suggestion that they had to awkwardly hide a giant pair of wings under their cloaks. The angels at Jesus' tomb looked like young men in dazzling apparel. The idea that wings are a standard feature of every angel is a product of later art. Artists needed a visual way to distinguish an angel from a regular human in a painting, and wings became the perfect, beautiful symbol of their heavenly origin and their ability to travel between heaven and earth. So, do some angels have wings? Yes. Do all of them? The Bible suggests not. And finally, the halo. That neat golden circle that floats above an angel's head in countless paintings and Christmas pageants. This, my friends, is entirely an artistic invention. There's not a single mention of a halo anywhere in the Bible. It was a symbol used in Roman and later Christian art to signify a holy or divine person. When angels are associated with light in the Bible, it's not a tidy little circle. It's an overwhelming, terrifying, all-encompassing radiance. The angel at the tomb had an appearance like lightning. The glory of the Lord that shone around the shepherds was a brilliant, terrifying light that filled the whole scene. The biblical light of an angel is not a neat accessory. It is the very fabric of their being, a radiant glory that is a dim reflection of the unbearable light of the God they serve. So, as we bring our journey to a close, what are we left with? Have we lost something by letting go of these popular ideas? Have we lost the comfort of knowing our loved ones are angels, that we have a personal bodyguard, that they fit our neat visual categories? I hope not. My hope is that we have traded a picture that is small and mostly about us for one that is vast and entirely about God. The biblical story of angels is not, ultimately, a story about us. It is a story about the greatness, the majesty, the holiness, and the loving care of the God they serve. They are not us, perfected. They are a different order of creation, whose existence reminds us that the universe is far stranger and more populated than we can imagine. Their protection is not limited to a single assignment, but is as vast and as readily available as the armies of heaven. Their appearance is not confined to our artistic conventions, but can be as terrifying as a four-faced beast of fire and lightning, or as humble as a dusty traveler in need of a meal. By clearing away some of the folklore, we are left with a picture that is, I think, far more challenging and far more wonderful. It challenges us to find our hope not in becoming angels, but in the glorious resurrection of our own unique, God-given humanity. It challenges us to find our security not in a single, personal bodyguard, but in the overwhelming power and provision of a God who commands legions. And it challenges us to look for the sacred, not just in visions and spectacular events, but in the face of the stranger, in the ordinary moments of our lives. The true story of angels, the one whispered and shouted through the pages of the Bible, does what the angels themselves always do. It points away from itself and points us toward the one who sits on the throne. It invites us to join with the seraphim, to cover our faces in humility, and to sing of a God who is holy, 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 and whose glory fills the whole earth. And that, I think, is a story beautiful and comforting enough for any of us. Now, as our time together ends, I hope you feel a little closer to the mystery, a little more in awe of the God who created such beings, and a little more at peace. May your rest be deep, and may you be kept safe, not just by one, but by all the power and love that heaven can afford. Good night.